What's up? This is the 2 Hour Grind. I'm Nate, and today I'm going to be rocking and rolling on this Ghostface from Scream. So I'm going to be drawing Ghostface today. Ghostface is pretty iconic in the horror realm, so I've been doing these horror guys over the month of October, so I got a couple more coming up. Did a couple sketches already, and I struggled with them last night. Here's a quick little really sped up video of that. I sketched him a bunch of times during that erase, sketch, and that's just kind of how I work sometimes. I have it so close, and then I just got, a little frustrated and erased it all. So I got a couple sketches, Ghostface, and then I kind of dug the breaking through the door, and this was my favorite one out of all of them, so I want to do this one of him breaking through the door. My first step is always going to be like putting it on a better piece of paper. I like to sketch on the cheap printer paper. I can do it. It's recyclable, it's quick, easy, and then switch over to a fine paper. I've been on a grayscale kick. I found some really nice paper is what I'm going to use for this. It's from that video that I just showed you. I'm starting it from scratch. Here we go. I'm going to use my light table to transfer. I'm going to have to just turn lights on and off. Alright, here we go. So I just will lay out really lightly, just tracing what I already drew. So hopefully I'm going to get these pencils done today, because today is the first game of the playoffs for the O's Kansas City. Opening night for the playoffs. I'm excited to watch. So I'm going to work on this for a little bit and then hop over to that. So we got a little light source behind him. Alright, so the sketch is getting there. Pencils being laid down. So one of the things that you got to keep an eye out for, and it's something that I fall victim of too, is when you're doing overlapping shapes, not to let both of those lines meet at the same place, right? You don't want the lines to connect. You want to make sure there's some kind of difference between the edges of the shapes so that when they overlap, it looks like they're overlapping and not just becoming one shape and there's just a line in the middle. And that's kind of what happens. So if I would match these up, it would just look like that is part of the knife. You don't want that. So you got to make sure to bring it down a little bit further just to really differentiate that this is on top of and in front of the knife. For the most part, sketch is done, ready to go. The O's are in the playoffs. Game 1's tonight. I gotta go watch them play. I say that and then I keep working, right? That's what happens every time. Erase that little part of getting off and get back to it. Now, another thing I like to do, which I've said in previous videos, is keep your lines parallel to the plane that they're on to make that form unified. Makes it feel like they're on that plane. Right? It's going back in space, each one. There's other circumstances, though, that could work the other way. So it's not a, there's no rule in art that says you can only do it one way, right? That's just one of the ways I do it. Right here is one of those lines that I'm talking about. I got this line coming down from the up top, and it basically aligns with his hand, and it comes straight down. So you want to move it over just a little bit beyond it, so it's not quite aligned with that line. All right, Ghostface from Scream, pencils, markers. I'm gonna hit this with some Copic, some Prismacolors, my normal kind of run, and finish it off with some Uni Poscas, make that mask, his mask really pop, right? Because this is grayscale paper. So when I go back into it with the white, it's gonna really pop, really get that light lit up, get some of the back of him lit up, so it really pulls him forward in front of everything else. All right, coming up soon, next time. Not next time, it's happening now. I'm gonna jump into it. Gotta have my spare. I'm gonna practice on, again, he's on grayscale paper, so when I put that white in, hopefully that mask is going to pop off the page, and I'll have a little bit of highlights going on behind him from the light source up at the top of the porch roof. So I don't know how much of the pencil I want to leave in here, and I don't really know how to feel about smudging, but sometimes I really like to see the lines in my paper, right? I like to see those lines in the direction. And when you blend it, you lose that somewhat. Somewhat you get it, somewhat you don't. I just want to loosen some of those edges so that the there's not a hard edge on another hard edge when I go in and add the color. The markers are going to kind of have a hard edge sometimes when you blend them. They don't always bleed into each other for a perfect blend. So this is the eBrush. I got it. It's alright. Vibrates quite a bit, so I put it on the floor so it doesn't move as much. It's got 3 speeds. Usually I'm keeping it on the highest speed. I'm gonna just start laying in some cool grays. Alright, so that's going to do it for the eBrush right now. All I really wanted to do was kind of set up where the gradual change is going to be from the highlight to like the dark shadows, right? Because this outfit is all black, so most of this is going to be pretty dark, right? Light source up here, shining down, so he's going to have that highlight on the back, the top right here. Everything else is going to go darker in the value scale right here, so going to keep working and adding those. I did choose to use warm grays on him, cool grays in the background. I wanted kind of like that bluish night sky behind him, right? Now this is one spot that I found that I actually overlapped in the wrong direction. I call this pencils, inks, and mistakes for a reason. So when I was coloring it in, you can see that this line actually goes from here up over it. It should go the opposite direction. It should be coming down from here because this part of the leg is in front of this part of the leg. So it's one of those things that you got to keep an eye out for. Even I still do it sometimes. And if I didn't mention this, I feel like I drew it kind of at a little bit of an angle. So when you get that perspective just right, it might be a little bit off. However, gonna push through it. Gonna keep rolling on this one because it is still the month of October. This is my second week. I'm gonna have Freddy Krueger coming up next week. So I got a couple good sketches of him the other day. Kind of figured out what pose I wanted. And then I'm just trying to figure out, mess around with how I want his gesture to be, you know, because he's kind of wild a little bit, right? And laughs a little bit, and so we'll see. That's coming up next week. Finishing the screen now. Let's go. So when doing perspective, it's nice to have a large working space because sometimes I gotta put two pieces of paper together to get where I want that other vanishing point to sit and then be able to work with it, right? It's kind of hard when you're tight in there, and you can fake it. Of course, you can fake it if you want to. I like to try to keep it close. I'll draw it with the ruler and do all that first, and then I'll go in and just freehand over top of all those lines for the details and things like that, just to give it that my own flair, I guess. Right, I think that's going to do it for part 2. Part 3, line work, the rest of this background, wrapping it all up in about 2 seconds for you guys. Alright, so the next step is going to be background. I'm going to add some grayscale, just grayscale to the background. I'm going to make the door a color. I haven't decided what color I want to make it yet. Might be a red. I feel like it's a little cliche, but I might do red anyway. We'll figure that out in a few minutes. I'm going to start with the trim. Of course, house trim. What color is it usually? White, right? Most houses inside especially. So it's going to have white columns outside. I got to actually stretch this column out a little bit further and fix a little bit of things in there. But for the most part, hopping into that next. Alright, now I got the door. How do I do the door? What other colors do I want to make it? I'm going to start with the metal kick plate down at the bottom. Like a lot of doors. I'll put one on there. I like cool grays for metals usually. Gotta be careful when you erase, right? You don't want to pull back like I just did and catch a corner or an edge. Always like to take it all the way off the paper and then bring it up and around instead of going back and forth, because you'll catch that edge like I just did. But it wouldn't be called pencils, inks, and mistakes if I didn't make a couple every once in a while too, right? We all do. They all line up. Alright, here we go. Let's hope this works out and it's not too overpowering. Line work? Line work? Then some white? Probably. I think that's what's up next. As always, what I'm going to do, thick outline in the silhouette of the shape of like what I want popping forward the most, which is Ghostface. So it's just going to be the furthest outline. Sometimes I will go in and like add that line and make sure to thin it out by the time it gets in. But I'll try just to stay with a really thick silhouette shape. Starting to come together? I hope so. I know the perspective isn't 100%. I really wanted to try to exaggerate the like downward, you know, he's lunging down at somebody trying to like stab, right? The movie stab, scream, whatever. Now, as I'm drawing all these little spikes, I don't know if I've talked about like the line of beauty. It's called. It's kind of like an S curve for everything. And instead of drawing like a straight line for whatever it might be, it's kind of like make sure to add those curves a little bit just to add that flair to it. And that's kind of what I do in each one of these. I know it's probably a little bit hard to see, but they're not just like old school kindergarten mountains, right? You're not just doing a zigzag line. To make it, you want to like add a little bit of flavor to them, add a little wave. Now I did go in there with the thicker outline in some areas where I like things that overlap. I do like to have a thicker outline on the like closest to the camera or closest to the viewer, I should say. But for instance, the knife. I want the knife to overlap this rope that's in the background. So I'm going to exaggerate like the silhouette outline of this knife even further than what I've already been exaggerating with some of the outlines everywhere else. So I want like a really thick outline to really try to make it pop forward. Now, granted, it's going to have some white reflection on it too, hopefully. Alright, stopping point for today, so I get fresh eyes on it. Last touch-ups, part 3, in about 2 seconds for you guys. Alright, so we got the last couple steps ready to go. I think I want to darken the trees a little bit more, probably one more layer. Hopefully push them back a little bit more. They're kind of nicely faded, but I might just do one more set of like a 5 or a 7. Gonna add the highlights, Uni Poscas. Let's jump into it. Got a little damage, like the action shot, the little bit of action. I want to make, probably use the white highlights for that too. A little bit more in the background. I don't even think you guys can see what I'm doing right here. So maybe I'll talk about it a little bit. I'm just taking away, erasing, taking away some of the lines. When you draw with pencil, usually sometimes what happens is this edge of your palm will catch some of that graphite and you'll kind of smear it around. So sometimes there's that little layer and you go through and erase it. This is an electric eraser and it's quite amazing actually. If you don't have one for like really fine, just erasing little lines, it can get in really tight corners, which is kind of nice, and that's what I like about it. Usually I like to use the big white erasers for everything else, but when it comes to it, this thing's great for fine details. Sometimes it'll pick up a little bit of the marker, not really. Probably more of the paper particles than actually the marker, if it's lifting anything. So a little bit of background, a little bit more shadow. I'm going to avoid like actually inking any of the line work in the background. I'm going to keep it all pencil just to keep it lighter so that it has that transition, that hopefully that look, that it's further back because it's not popping forward with that dark black, which I'm trying to get the Scream character Ghostface to pop forward the most. So he should be the darkest. He's going to have a nice highlight though around the top in a minute. Once I get there, I'm going to do one more layer of shadows around the door frame, a little bit on these columns back here as well. Alright, I think it's time for the Uni Posca white step. Step, last thing I usually like to do. I'm not gonna bloody his knife, because he's busted through the door, so it's before he murdered somebody, right? No, I'm bloodied up the Jason machete, so I don't want to do the same thing on every single one of them. Want to have a little bit of a difference in these four, so that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Alright, so Uni Posca's last step, white, putting it on top of everything else. Really going to bring that mask forward. Probably pop this light forward a little bit. I do have the Molotov as well. Molotov goes down a little bit more opaque. The Uni Poscas are sometimes have a little bit of a transparency to them, so you can kind of see through them. So sometimes I like to use those first and then go on top of them with the other one. It all depends on how white I want things to get. This is grayscale paper, so when I put the white down, it should really pop things forward. I'm not really going to mess with any of the highlights in the background, maybe the tiniest touch on the columns, but probably not too much. I don't want to draw attention to it. I want it to be in the background. I know it's not the most rendered, or, I didn't spend a whole lot of time back there, but so I'm not really worried about that as much. But the door frame is going to get a little edge highlight, some of the little specks that are flying through the air. So that little bit is just like white out. I'm just going to white it out so then I can put gray back on top of it and hopefully make that work, because that line was a little bit off. Okay, so let me try this. See if you guys can see. Oh, when I was in front of that light, let me see if I turn this off. Now you can kind of see the white highlights. So I put a little bit on that knife. Got to do the light up top and his mask. That's going to wrap up week 2's horror icon, Ghostface from Scream. I know the white gets washed out with the camera and the lighting, so sometimes you gotta finagle it a little bit to see. Alright, so thanks for checking this out. Next week, Freddy Krueger. If you want to check that out, or any of my other art videos, check out my channel. It's right over here. That little subscribe click is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. And while you're at it, give me a like on this video. Thanks for staying till the end and checking us out. Also, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you have any questions about any of the techniques that I used, please feel free to ask. Thank you guys for stopping by, checking out this video. I'm Nate. This was the 2-hour grind, and I'll catch you on the next grind.